Utah is about to change fast, and if you're thinking about moving here, the biggest mistake you can make is choosing where to live based only on what you see today. Because some of the most important changes are already in motion, and they're going to directly impact home values, commute times, and what daily life actually feels like, depending on where you end up. So let's start with the biggest one right away, because this is the project that's going to reshape the entire Wasatch Front. Right now in Draper, the former Utah State Prison site is being transformed into what's being called the Point. And this is over 600 acres of land being developed into a massive mixed-use hub with residential, office space, retail, and entertainment all built together. This is being designed as a second downtown for the entire region, positioned right between Salt Lake County and Utah County, the two counties in the state with the highest population. Early plans project tens of thousands of jobs tied directly to this development, along with thousands of housing units and commercial space that will attract both major companies and local businesses. And here's why this matters for you if you're moving here. This is going to create a new central point for where people want to live. Right now, a lot of demand is centered around Salt Lake and Lehi. But as this builds out, you're going to start seeing demand push directly into areas like Draper, Bluffdale, Riverton, and South Jordan in a much more aggressive way. I had a client who bought in Bluffdale a couple of years ago when it still felt a little removed from everything. And at the time, it was more about getting space for the price. Now, as the Point continues to move forward, that same area is becoming one of the most strategically positioned locations in the entire state. And this is how people either get ahead of growth or they get priced out of it. Because once this is fully underway, you're not buying into potential anymore, you're paying for it. Now, right alongside that, you have what's already been driving Utah's growth for the last decade, and that's the expansion of the Silicon Slopes. This tech corridor running through Lehi, Draper, and into parts of Salt Lake County has turned into one of the fastest growing job hubs in the country. You've got companies like Adobe and Qualtrics continuing to expand, along with a constant flow of startups and mid-sized businesses building out operations here. And what that creates is high-income job growth concentrated in very specific areas. This is where people get caught off guard. They hear Utah is booming and they assume that that growth is spread evenly across the map. But it's not. It's actually clustered tightly around job centers. So what happens is areas like Lehi, Draper, and parts of Sandy see much stronger demand, which pushes home prices up, it pushes rents up, and competition is higher in those pockets. I recently worked with someone relocating from out of state who initially wanted to save some money by moving further west, thinking they could just commute into the tech corridor. And on paper, it looked like a 25-minute drive, but in reality, during peak hours, that turned into 45 minutes to over an hour, depending on traffic. And within months, they told me that that commute alone changed how they felt about where they lived. And this is where your decision really becomes a reality. Living near the job center and living in the job center are two completely different experiences. And as all this growth continues, it puts serious pressure on the infrastructure, which is already being pushed hard across the Wasatch Front. Utah is investing heavily into expanding I-15, which is the main north-south freeway connecting everything from Ogden all the way down through Salt Lake and into Utah County. You're seeing lane expansions, major interchange upgrades, and long-term construction projects designed to handle the increasing population. And on top of all that, there's already investment into the Frontrunner, the commuter rail system, including double tracking projects that will allow for more frequent and faster service between cities. The TRAX light rail system is also expanding in certain areas, improving connectivity within Salt Lake County. And here's why this matters for you. The area you choose today might feel manageable in terms of commute, but as population increases and construction continues, that same commute can quickly change. I had someone tell me their drive from Saratoga Springs into Lehi nearly doubled over the course of a year as more people moved into the area and the road work really started to ramp up. So when you're choosing where to live, you're not just choosing based on current traffic, you're choosing based on where infrastructure is headed and how quickly an area is growing. Now here's one that most people overlook completely, but has a big impact on certain parts of the valley. And that's the Utah Inland Port in the northwest section of Salt Lake County. This is a large-scale logistics and distribution hub designed to connect rail system, trucking routes, and global trade into one centralized location. And what that brings is jobs, industrial development, and major infrastructure investment into areas that historically haven't really seen the same level of attention. These are places like Magna, West Valley, and even out towards Tooele are all being affected by this. And this is where you really have to understand both sides of the equation. On one hand, this can bring more affordability opportunities and long-term growth into those areas. But on the other hand, it also introduces increased traffic, industrial expansion, and potential concerns around air quality depending on proximity. I've had many conversations with buyers who were looking in these areas strictly based on price without realizing how much development was planned nearby. And this is where you want to be very intentional. Lower price doesn't always mean better value if the surrounding environment is changing in ways you didn't account for. All right, now shifting back into residential growth, one of the fastest growing areas right now is the west side of Salt Lake Valley, particularly South Jordan, Daybreak, and Harriman. Daybreak is one of the most established master plan communities in Utah, and it continues to expand with new phases, retail centers, schools, and amenities being built all over. And this is a very specific type of lifestyle that attracts a lot of people relocating here because you have newer homes, organized communities, walkability, and a more predictable environment. But here's the trade-off that people don't always think about. As more people move into these areas, congestion increases, especially getting in and out during peak hours. I worked with a family who loved everything about Daybreak, the layout, the community, the amenities, but after living there for a few years, their biggest frustration became the time it took to get where they needed to during the week. So again, this comes down to priorities. If you want newer construction and a planned community feel, this is one of the best areas for it. But if your job or daily routine requires frequent travel across the valley, you need to factor that in before making a decision. Now, looking forward, one of the biggest catalysts that's going to accelerate everything we're talking about is the 2034 Winter Olympics coming back to Salt Lake City. This is not just a one-time event. Historically, hosting the Olympics drives long-term infrastructure improvements, increased global visibility, and attracts additional investment into the region. You're going to see upgrades to transportation, improvements to venues, and increased development activity leading up to the event. And what this tends to do is compresses timelines. Projects that might have taken longer to complete get pushed forward faster. Demand increases as more attention is brought to the area. And this creates another layer of upward pressure on housing in key locations. The people who understand this treat it as a long-term catalyst. The ones who ignore it are usually reacting to the effects later when prices have already adjusted. And then there's one of the most important long-term factors shaping Utah's future that almost nobody talks about when they're deciding where to move, and that's water and sustainability. With the level of growth happening here, water usage and conservation are becoming big focuses across the state. You're already seeing changes in how developments are approved, how landscaping is managed, and how long-term planning is structured. And while this might not impact your day-to-day life immediately, it absolutely affects where growth continues and how sustainable certain areas are long-term. Areas with strong infrastructure and planning will continue to expand. Others may face limitations or slower growth depending on how resources are managed. And this is one of those factors that sits in the background but plays a major role in shaping the future of Utah. When you step back and you look at all this together, what becomes very clear is that Utah's growth is not random. It's happening in specific areas driven by specific developments, and those developments are going to determine where the best opportunities are and where the biggest challenges show up. And this is where I'll say this very clearly, because this is where a lot of people either get this right or completely miss it. If you're making a decision about where to live in Utah based only on what you see today, you are missing a huge part of the picture, because two areas that look very similar right now can end up very different over the next 3 to 5 years, depending on what's being built around them. The people who end up loving where they live are the ones who understand both the present and the future. They're not guessing. They're not relying on surface level information. They're making decisions based on where things are actually heading. The people who regret their move are the ones who didn't take the time to fully understand that bigger picture. So if you're seriously thinking about moving to Utah in the next 3 to 6 months and you want help figuring out which areas make the most sense based on everything we just talked about, that's exactly what my team and I help people navigate every single day. Reach out, have a conversation with us, and we'll help you map this out so you can make a decision with clarity instead of uncertainty. I'll see you in the next video.